Government will undertake 80% of the cost. Employees, employers will be about 10% equal, sharing equal each. In other words, an average worker, and those be on a sliding scale. The more income you make, you pay a little bit more, and lower income, you pay a little bit less. Right? Average, you pay about $10 a month into this insurance scheme. Right? Takes you about $100, $120 a month. You make up that pool of about $2 billion, so that when the retrenchment comes, the government is able to take care of that, of the needs of these retrenched workers. Let me go back there. Now, in terms of funding, it's based on 2.1 million resident workers in Singapore, on, as I said, a cap of $3,700 median wage, based on a bad situation of 5% unemployment. Our unemployment rate right now is about 2 to 3%. If a crisis hits and the number doubles, the amount doubles, we're talking about 5%, and as I said, on median wage, 2.1 million workers. We're talking an annualized budget for restart of about $2 billion. Okay? You think that's a lot? Well, think about it. Right? Already it's GIC, or Temasek Holdings. It's just signing checks for business ventures. This is Olam Industries. Right? Questionable investments. How much was it? $4 billion. No problem. Pocket change for it. We're talking about retrenched workers here, and an annual budget of only $2 billion. The next point that we talked about was to reduce income inequality is to address the concerns of the Malay community. The disparity, if you look at statistics, our Malay families are having problems keeping up. And that is all to do with some systemic, structural problems within, right from the start of our education system and so on and so forth, continues to put them at a disadvantage. And I can tell you this discrepancy is not going to help us in our national unity. Okay? All these problems, economic problems, will translate into political, social problems. Okay? I won't go on at length about this point because we brought it up and we addressed it at length in our Malay community, Malay paper already, Malay community paper already. The next point that we need to really talk about is to recalibrate our tax structure. Around 2002, when our top income tax bracket, personal income tax brackets was about 28%. When Lee Hsien Loong, just about that time when he became Prime Minister, he reduced it to 20%, so that your billionaires, right now, top income bracket, you pay 20%. And that's not the figure, because a lot of them can claim, you know, different statuses and you know, so that they pay less than that. What we're advocating is for the top 1% of income earners, and you're talking about the average, given a ballpark figure of about $700,000 a year income. Okay, works up to about $65,000 a month. How many of you make that? But all our ministers make that amount. What we're saying is that return our income tax bracket for this top 1% to 28%. That amount we calculated is about able to sustain the restart program, about $2 billion annually. We're saying abolish GST for basic necessities, education, your books, textbooks, right, for medicine. At the same time, increase GST for luxury items. You want to buy your Rolex Oyster Date, you want to buy your Lamborghinis, you want to go and buy your Christian Dior, pay premium for it. Increase it, not keep it at 7%. Compared to that lady who needs to buy textbooks for a child, you also pay 7%? Doesn't make sense. Right? Reinstate estate duty for the super rich. Yes. I forget the date, but it was in the late, I don't know, it was the late 2000s. All of a sudden, you just got this report that your inheritance tax was all of a sudden just scrapped. And it was done within a matter of, my memory serves me correctly, 1, 2, 3 readings in Parliament, and then within a couple of months, it was just abolished. Right? What we're saying is, for this, and I want to emphasize super rich, your exemption threshold, we put it as $20 million. Okay? In other words, if your property is $20 million and above, you're in for it. Okay? Unless you're living in Sentosa Cove, I would say you don't have very much to worry about. And if you do, if you live in Sentosa Cove around here, please be very mindful that our donation back. Now, the next point, we've been talking about reducing income inequality, correct? We want to get it into your social security right now. Our CPF system is broken. Who broke it? It's been misused, it's been abused. What we need to do is fix it again. Okay? Various studies have shown between 70% to 90% of retirees don't have sufficient income to survive. Now, the government sells us a minimum sum scheme. I can tell you that could be a red herring. That is a red herring there. Why? Because if you were to return all the lump sum to retirees, the vast majority of them would not have enough to live on, even if they don't go to the casino, even if they don't go to Vietnam or Batam, correct? Just to survive on, they won't have enough. So when they finish up, what happens? The government has to think of how we're going to handle it, correct? And the government doesn't want this problem. You draw the fact that on bare minimum, your retirees still don't have enough. And don't forget, Singaporeans save on average about 40% of the CPF. At one point, it went up to 50%, I think it was 1985. Lee Kuan Yew insisted that all workers had to put away 50%, and that was to a lot of protests, pushback from his cabinet. But he rammed it through. Sure enough, a couple of years later, we experienced a recession. And then they quickly cut CPF rates so that they can put more money into people's pocket again. But it's maintained about 40%. Ask anyone in this world. 40% of retirement savings. That's the highest in the world. And yet, upon retirement, they tell us you don't have enough. Right? We've got to fix this. First step, what we're going to do is make sure that the government returns our people 20%. I beg your pardon. Full. I said 20% because I was just going to say this advisory plan has come up. It is completely unseemly for this government to start bargaining with the citizens, right? 20%. No. Full. You watch. At some point they say, okay, for 40%. And then they start this bargaining percent. We say, it's the people's money. You promised us when we started off in the workforce that you're going to return the money at 55. Honor your promise. And then for people who keep saying, yeah, you know, there are some people who squander their savings. It's okay, fine. All right, we'll put in a clause, opt-in. All right, if you feel that you cannot control your spending, there's an opt-in scheme, but that's strictly voluntary. At any point in time, you feel that no, that's not working out for you. You must be able to withdraw your savings. We also recommend that you pay higher CPF interest rates. GIC, Temasek Holdings, boasts that their returns are, don't know, in the double digits. But they don't show us the accounts. If it is, then you're paying us 2.5% interest rates on our ordinary account. It's unconscionable. It's an implicit tax. Professor Mukul Asha has said that time and time again in the US. And then remove land costs from HDB price. Why? If you remove land cost, right, then you don't have to use your CPF to service your housing loans. So that when you do that, at the end of the day when you retire, you don't have enough for your CPF. Okay, and I talked about household debt just a little while ago. This is the main problem. Lower healthcare costs, right? MediSave. The rate, the amount that we've got to, we must keep with in our MediSave account is $43,500. And then you can't touch it. Okay? Now, what we're advocating in our healthcare paper is that scrap MediSave, take the amount, $43,500, put it back into a member's CPF account. And then you plus the fact that then you less about half of the HDB price. You end up having sufficient. And if you also throw in your high interest rates, you will have enough for retirement. Okay? Increase social spending. Now, we on internal security and foreign affairs. Okay? So that's about what, 15 billion? Take a guess. How much we spend on our elderly? We put aside the budget. 1%? Not any bit. 0.5%? Not any bit. 0.25%? We spent 0.1%, 2009 budget. I don't think it's changed very much. On the elderly. And this, again, is unconscionable. What we've proposed is for the Ministry of Social, MSF, right now, okay, to undertake and increase its budget for expenditure on the elderly. Now that's social security. John talked a little bit about GIC a little while ago, and we want to talk about transparency and accountability. Okay. One of the things that is causing our economy huge problems is because of this growth at all costs, what Feng had talked about. Okay? PAP's legitimate claim to power is because we are going to deliver how many percent economic growth. Because if you don't, then what are you there for? You're authoritarian. You don't allow us to have our democratic rights. So only all these decades has said that, vote PAP in, because we're the only ones, right? That's in 2012, I think. It's the biggest on record for 20 years. 30% jump from the previous year. You have all these social problems creeping in. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to be the richest little island in the world and have its people stressed and unhappy? These are the things that we've got to look at. And that is why we're proposing that other than using your GDP, put in alternative indicators such as a genuine progressive index that we talked about in the population. That will take into GDP as well as other factors such as social costs. Your cost in going into producing that GDP. You get a better picture, right, of the wellness of the country. And then we've got to develop our domestic private sector. We've got to increase the credit supply for SMEs. We've got to restructure the tax regime, bring down land costs. As I said, one of the biggest bugbears of our entrepreneurs is saying that land costs. You're just working just to pay off the rent. Okay? Scale back your GLCs. Dr. Ting Chun Meng's case situation recently came up. And this is what we're talking about. Right? Let me give you just an indication of how unentrepreneurial it can be. In terms of the number of patents that have been filed, right? The survey shows that the US, of course, takes the top. Per capita, on a per capita basis, number of patents filed in a year, US registered about 16.2, all right? Sweden, about 7 point something. Japan, 7 point something. Taiwan, 4 point something. Singapore, 1.2. And of that, 90% are foreigners. You have that small number of people who are locally based. One of them, I suspect, might be Tan Chun Ming. I don't know. And yet then you have him getting into this altercation with the government. MINDEF, known as an organization, a ministry tasked with defending Singapore, and then has to complain that someone, an lone individual, is harassing him. What we're saying is that make sure that our entrepreneurs, our entrepreneurial class, small, medium-sized businesses, are the ones that are going to be the engine of our growth. That's the only way that we're going to be able to increase productivity. That's the only way that we're going to become more innovative and create more opportunity for subsequent generations, not continuing to depend on the multinationals. Then we've also got to get away from this tax haven status. You know, we've been rewriting all our tax laws and so on and so forth so that we can attract those millionaires, billionaires. You read recently, I think it was just yesterday or a day before, Indonesian President Joko Widodo, right? He says he's going to do an amnesty to get all these, and you know, they're talking about just a few, you know. They're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of these rich Indonesian people coming into Singapore to get away from the regime when Suharto government fell. They're attracting back. The US is putting pressure on us through FATCA, right? The OECD is also putting pressure on countries not to continue all these tax haven practices. Okay, it does no one any good. Let me just stick on this point. What we've advocated is we've got to get rich. We've got to engage in wealth creation through innovation, through hard work, not wealth management, by rewriting our laws and bringing all these really questionable people bringing in all these amounts of money. Okay. Then we've got to divest Temasek Holdings. Let me just give you an idea. In 2004, Lee Hsien Loong announced, and it was this Straits Times report, very inconspicuous, and the headline was totally not on that topic as well, but there's a little paragraph in there that then Lee Hsien Loong wanted to call for the Parliament actually amended the Constitution, not introduce legislation, even subsidiary legislation, amended the Constitution to allow the reserves to be transferred to GLCs, to statutory bodies. And the catch in there, the caveat in there, was that then it will not be considered as a draw on the reserves. And if you don't consider that as a draw on reserves, you don't let to seek authorization or permission from the president, right? If you don't seek it from the president, it doesn't become public. And this is where the problem is. GLCs, how productive? How profitable are they? How efficient are they when you have all these transfer of funds? It's highly questionable. Okay. What we're advocating, right, is to get Temasek Holdings to divest, right, with the exception of a few security issues, and perhaps if they have been traditionally, shown to be doing well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So the Americans say, right? But the vast majority of them have to be reviewed, have to be looked into, and what we're saying is that I remember the government also in the late 1990s, just around the turn of the century, I think, put together what they call the Public Service Divestment Committee, where the committee was then tasked to look into which GLCs needed to be divested, and in other words, privatized. Okay, we're saying we need to bring this back, and we're advocating the setting up of the Government Divestment Commission to continue this process. It stopped after a few years. I couldn't find a lot of information about why, and the whys and wherefores of why this divestment committee was stopped. Then we've got to reform GIC management. GIC now shall submit annual reports to Parliament for scrutiny. The reports shall include investment activity and full financial accounts. Management shall provide investment strategies and risk management of the strategies. Management shall provide account for corporate social responsibility. Ministers, MPs, and their relatives shall not be permitted on the governing board or management team. And lastly, GIC officials shall be appointed by the President subject to public confirmation hearings by Parliament. Okay, in other words, the Government Parliamentary Committee. Government producers who should be the CEO, who should be on the board, who should be on the management team, yes, but come before Parliament, GPC, all right? And we'll go through a confirmation process. They've got to come on oath and tell them what their relations, if any, and their experience and so on, and only after that confirmation will they then be allowed to sit on. And then they need them all to be independent, okay, in the investment strategies and everything. Of course, they need to put out the reports. Well, we've also recommended, if you read our papers, and by the way, I just want to alert you that we're going to upload 2 versions of this paper. One is the abridged version. It's about 15 pages long, where we summarized everything into a very readable, more readable whole. And the other one we're going to put up is our full paper, which is about 105 pages. But that's also including our references and everything in detail. And you can go in and do the research and the verification if you wish. But in that, what I'm trying to say is, if you look at the paper itself, what we're also proposing is to hive off a part of our reserves, so that this other team then can also independently do its investments, and then can compete with GIC to see who performs better. Correct? Otherwise, how are we to know? Right? And there's no competition there. Investments are going to be problematic. Okay. Then we need to talk about very quickly about innovation and productivity. That is going to is going to drive us forward. Without productivity, without innovation, our situation is going to stagnate. In fact, we're going to go into a decline. We have to reform the education system. We talked about this at length in our education paper. I won't belabor the point here. We have to emphasize intrinsic motivation. Okay, not keep having people be motivated by money all the time. And I can tell you, experiments. I know this from my own professional training, that if you would keep motivating children and grown-ups as well, just dangle the carrot in front of them, they're not going to be more productive. Okay? What people do is, if you look at Steve Jobs, for example, what motivated him? It wasn't money. It was for his aesthetics, what he really valued in producing a good product. And you ask any of the top entrepreneurs, it never is about money. Sure, when you start making money, hey, that's good. But the motivation behind it is always your own passion in wanting to produce something that people want to use, people can adopt. Okay. To do that, we need to open up our political space. Okay. With this kind of authoritarian regime, I can tell you, we're not going to get anywhere. And we can talk all about productivity all you want. Mr. Shanmugaratnam, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, he's a financial analyst, right? Brilliant. Okay. But the one thing that he doesn't understand is that when it comes to productivity, okay, that's where economics stops, and that's when psychology begins. You try motivating people through charts and graphs and tweaking of levy here and there. And it's not that they've not tried it, they've been trying it for the past 10, 15 years. It's not shown to work. To motivate people, you need to give them the freedom to think. You need to give them that sense of belonging to society, so that they want to do something. Not just thinking of leaving Singapore all the time. Mind you, more than 50% of Singaporeans, given a chance, have indicated they want to emigrate. How are you going to sustain an economy, much less a nation, when it comes to problems like this? So amend the Constitution, all right? Explicitly guarantee people the freedom of speech, assembly, and association. Abolish the Internal Security Act. Amend the NPP Act. Not just allow the government control the company in MediaCorp and SPH to exist. Amend the Legal Profession Act. Right? The lawyers are right now barred from commenting on legislation, on the passage of legislation. Everybody's gagged. Nobody really dares to speak up. Abolish Public Order Act. amend Parliamentary Elections Act to make it truly, genuinely democratic and free. And then lastly, you've got to empower workers. And by empowering workers, I mean stop putting cabinet ministers as secretary generals of the NTUC. When you do things like that, you take all this collectively as a whole, and I'm just saying not piecemeal, but take it collectively, you can begin to see how unproductive, how uninnovative single parliaments are. When I wrote that article in Huffington Post, free the media, let people go. It's not just the media I was talking about, right? It's the whole climate here. In this day and age, you still insist on one newspaper, one television station. Who does that? Who does that anymore? And if we're going to talk about competing at the international level, no can do. If we're going to push ahead, we've got to free the people, let the people go and realize their own potential. That's how we're going to drive innovation, that's how we're going to drive productivity. So all this comes as a package, and we hope to be able to, going into the next general elections, continue to encourage, continue to persuade PAP, continue to convince Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong to engage us on these policies and have a national debate, rather than continue the name calling, which is not going to move Singapore anywhere. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Chee. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you do not want, I shouldn't say that. If you want to have your CPF returned to you in full, if you want the Parliament to reinstate the estate duty, please help us get into Parliament and be your voice in Parliament. You can do so two ways: by donating to our party, and also step forward and be a volunteer. All is not gloomy. Before we go on to our next Q&A, may I invite 3 persons up on stage. Ms. Chee Sok Chin, Dr. Paul Tambaya, Mr. Jufri Mahmood, our CEC member. Even though we call for the abolish of ISD, but we found out it's their birthday. So, yeah. So, may I have the audience to join us and sing them a happy birthday song?
Yes. I have to say I'm the youngest here.
No, when I join in the photo.
She's more hair than all of us.
So I have to say that I'm the oldest.
Can we have a close-up picture?
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Can you please make a wish first? Return back our CPF. Reinstate estate duty. We will now proceed to start with the Q&A. So just give us a minute.
Okay, as before, we'd like to open the Q&A to members of the media first, so that they get first shot at queries that they want to, and then we'll follow that up with any of the questions that the rest of the audience want to ask. Anybody who wants to proceed?
You can raise up your hand, I'll come to you.
Members of the media, okay? Yes, if you can identify yourself, it would be easier for us all. The media.
Weiman from 联合早报. I have a few clarifications, but first, can you explain how this policy came about? How long did the team work on it? How many on the team? And since the budget is coming up, and SDP usually comes up with a shadow budget, can we say that this is a shadow budget, or is SDP coming up with also another shadow budget in the weeks to come? Clarifications will be, I think when you're talking about the minimum wage, you also talked about how it would lead to an increased productivity level. Could you explain or elaborate on how this will bring about higher productivity levels? And does it also mean a less business-friendly environment? When we're talking about SDP's new economic vision, are we talking about moving away from the financial hub narrative that is usually
hang on to your questions, because I'm just going to address them, and I might need to ask you to come back and ask you to refresh my memory. Now, as far as the development of this paper is concerned, I don't exaggerate when I say it started almost 20 years ago. If you look at the publication that we put up there, it talked about some of these very basic issues. Of course, at that time, it wasn't fleshed out to the extent that it has this time around. And through the years, we'll continue to refine our policies. And in the 2001 elections, we talked at length, we campaigned on minimum wage, as well as some of these issues about employment in Singapore and advocating the Singapore's first policy. So through the years, we have refined it. And then in the last elections, if you recall, we published a document called It's About You. Thank you. We called it our Economic Manifesto. In there, we talked again at length about CPF, the retirement, healthcare, housing as well, and so on. And then we've continued since then to develop it until what we have today. Something that we are confident enough that we can take to the electorate in the next election and get support. Okay. Second part of your question, and that is, I remember this part about the us being a financial stronghold first, and then I'll tackle with the third part if I remember correctly for this. Now, as far as us being a financial center, there is a paper, and it's in our write-up. Two persons, Stephen Cacchetti and Denise Karoubi, they came up, they had this study, and they showed that up to a certain point, if your financial system grows, right, productivity and economic growth will keep in hand. Beyond a certain level, when the financial sector then begins to become a drag on your economy, okay? And what they've shown was that, and they've said that anywhere in between, if your total workforce, 3.5%, okay, of are employed in financial services, that's just about the maximum that your economy can take. Ministry of Finance recently, I think it was last year, year before, announced that the total number of Singaporeans, or of the workforce engaged in financial services is about 60%. And they're saying that that's been growing through the years. So we're talking about really, up to the point, your financial system is going to be a drag on your productivity. Go in and take a look at the paper, our paper, and the details are fleshed out in. The other point is, how much of this financial system do we understand? Right? We think that Tony Tan and your Salman Shanmugaratnams and all the rest of them are experts in this field. If they were so good at that, why did they continue to invest in some of these very dubious practices that was going on in the Western banks? Even when warning signals were coming up from Warren Buffett and your Rubin, correct? They didn't pick up any of this. And when they exploded, we lost something between 120 to 140 billion dollars of our reserves. Mind you, that's almost half of what we think that they had. Now, if it weren't for US, Obama, right, to come in and then implement what they call the Troubled Assets Relief Program, or TARP, when they bailed out money, bailed out Citigroup, Lehman Brothers, and there was Merrill Lynch and so on, all the money would have been gone, right? And then when they tried to, after the crisis was over, they tried to amend, put in more protection, okay, to the Dodd-Frank Act. And that has just not been sufficient, anywhere near effective in trying to control the financial system. If you read carefully, if you follow carefully, the global financial system is still in it. It's still in it. And here we are, wanting to be at the pinnacle on top of this heap of some very murky, a very murky system. And that's why I say, you know, then how do you progress? Right? Slow down, get back into a system whereby our banks, right, earn money the honest way, correct? Not you bring in retail investors, in retail banking. You pay them a certain amount, right? Then you lend out that amount of money to businesses and so on. Charge them a higher interest rate. You make that difference in interest rate. Go back to that kind of banking system, right? But nowadays you want to have bets on futures, then you have the credit default swaps and so on and so forth. And it's just making this whole global financial environment a completely dangerous place to be. And that's why I say Singapore, of all places, we should not be trying to aspire to be the top financial center in this. If we had to choose, let's choose to be Silicon Valley instead of Wall Street. That's what we're trying to say. Okay. Now, the third part of the question, could you just remind me again of what your question is?
Elaborating on how the minimum wage would actually lead to.
No, we're not just advocating minimum wage in terms of productivity. Okay? We're saying the whole package has got to go. Okay? You want to have a more productive workforce, you make sure, right, that not only do we have minimum wage, where workers' rights have to come in as well. I talked about the education policy, correct? You want to make sure that we don't keep putting in foreign workers to compete with our locals here, because you know, every time they come in, not only do they compete on the jobs themselves, on the wages. Time and again, we've heard, right? People coming in, and the locals. I remember someone telling us he was a cook at Marina Bay Sands. Right? The advertising, he answered to an ad, and he went and says, look, 1,000 feet. I can't go on. You know, 1,008 is what? You know, in Singapore terms. Along came a cook from China. Okay, willing to take 1,002. If you were an employer, you look at it. Where? Who do you, just in terms of cost alone? And that's what we say. We say, when you get people who are so unhappy, wages keep coming down, then it affects productivity. Okay? So we're not just advocating minimum wage, we're saying there's a whole package in there. And that must be reflected in how we approach this whole matter of productivity. Okay, have I dealt adequately with your... anybody else? Yes.
I'm Carissa from Street. Can I just clarify on the return the CPF in full, do you mean to everyone or to retirees?
Oh, you know, the law right now says that, you know, retirees you make sure that it existed before. You save up up to a certain age. When your age comes, government returns it to you. And what we're saying is that honor that original promise, that contract. Halfway through, you cannot change your mind and then say that, oh, no, we won't return it to you right now. CPF, don't forget, is like a bank. And we brought this up in one of our issues of New Democrat in somewhere around mid-2000 already, and we've been emphasizing on that all the time. Just imagine, you go to a bank and all of a sudden one day, the bank says, oh no, you cannot withdraw your deposit. How do you think that will work? They'll you start a riot, correct? The only difference is right now, it's not a private bank, this is a public bank. Public bank is where we vote the custodians in the power. This is where I think the PAP must honor its promise that it made years ago.
Okay, so just to clarify, it's not abolishing the scheme entirely, it's returning in full at that age.
Minimum sum?
Yes.
Well, if you want to return everybody the returns, then what is the rationale for minimum sum? Except as you said, for people who want to continue with minimum sum scheme, then there is this opt-in clause. That's what I was saying. So it's on a voluntary basis. So automatically, say for example, you know you're a retiree, you come up and you sit in front of the person. CPF official over there is not going to give you, like, tell you a long story why you cannot take it out. Immediately return it to you. But they will tell you, if you want to retain it with us, sign this form.
Okay, sorry. My last point of clarification is some experts have come out to say that, it's the whole problem of retirement inadequacy that's at the heart of this. So this is like people who don't even have enough in their CPF in the first place, even if you take them all out. So what's the SDP's proposal of dealing with this?
I touched on that during my presentation, where I said that it's a red herring, correct? That government keeps saying, oh, the retirees squander away their savings, correct? No, squander their savings. But in truth, even if you return that the whole lump sum, you still have your majority, 70–90% of your retirees not having enough to live on, right? And so if somebody's scrimping and trying to save and getting through the bare minimum, a retiree, and then still comes up short and they've still got 10–20 years in their life to go, it's an embarrassment on this government. So the government starts putting in this minimum sum. So look, this is not something that, this comes from the advisory panel that just came out, right? We talked about it a decade ago. Okay, we talked about CPF not having enough. You look at some of Your Future, My Faith, Our Freedom, in which I talked about inadequacy of the CPF scheme. Okay, so it's not nothing new. It's nothing new. Anyone?
So
yes.
Clarification. This is with regards to
the restart package, the $2 billion package. So you're supporting this $2 billion based on the tax regime changes, right?
No, it's a series of proposals that I don't know if I put it up on the but we talked about returning the personal income tax rate to 28% for the top 1% of income earners in Singapore. You're talking about introducing luxury tax for such goods, bringing down your GST, for example, and then making sure that our real estate duty exemption threshold, that's very important. I hope you guys won't misquote us because that's hugely important. Exemption threshold for $20 million and above. Okay? And for us to return to 28% for the top 1% of income earners, not across the board.
So the calculation is that these changes would be able to support
yes.
Okay. The part about the shadow budget, so...
Yes. Each shadow budget, if you follow, I beg your pardon, each budget that finance minister comes up, how different is it? Right now, your Ministry of Defense and your Defense Security Act and so on, always will occupy about a third of our budget. Next comes education, and then on down the line until you get the Ministry of Social Defense. So from year to year, the budget does not changed very much. So rather than us tracking it from year to year, we've depended on our shadow budgets, and what we're going to do is, we've worked that in, if you read our paper, we've worked that into our this paper as well. So take it, yes, that this, in combination with our past shadow budgets, this will serve as our, our commentary and our alternative and our response to Mr. Tharman's budget as it's going to announce it, I think, in a couple of weeks. If all media are done, sir, you.
I'm PFC. Just want to ask about the start. I've noticed that you might not have mentioned anything about retraining of workers. Is that
retraining?
Yes.
Of workers?
Yeah.
In terms of retraining of workers, yeah, it's something that we think is going to be the part of the package. But what we want to do is beyond retraining. You can have all the retraining you want, but if you're going to continue to bring in foreign workers that are going to compete with the retrained workers, what good is it going to be? I did a house visit a couple of weeks ago, and one of the residents was telling us how frustrating it is. He just went for retraining. He keep telling us retraining. And then when I started getting my diploma, my certificate in this, I go out and look for jobs. They're always not just a younger worker, but a foreign worker. So this is where all these problems come in. And it's only when you put your ear to the ground, you begin to understand what these situations. So when you're sitting at the top, retraining workers, it sounds good as a concept, right? But when then you don't control other parts of your economic strategy or policy, it's going to be problematic in some of these areas. And that's why I said at the outset, okay, you just kind of tweak here and fine tune there. You've got to take it as a whole package. Then it starts to work. Yeah.
Sorry, so let me just clarify. You do
yes, it's in our
I mean, this for the event the workers do need this kind of instruction.
They will, let the essay. You see, what I'm saying is that as a government, you don't need to keep telling workers, retrain yourself. Let the economy go. Your entrepreneurs will tell you what they need, right? And then they will send their workers for retraining them. This is where I say, we keep coming in and feel that, oh, without the government doing this, where are we going to go? No, look at the economy, right? You let the entrepreneurs take the lead. They will tell you where the requirements are and what skills are needed, what talent is required, and then your economy will be competitive in that sense. Okay. So you come up with
Mike. My question is, why don't your party leverage all the social scientists that you already have? You yourselves is an illustrious social scientist. Man beside you is another social scientist. You want to more. I ask this question because the PAP has so many social scientists, a whole army, a whole battalion, but they're doing a pretty rotten job. The guy there in SMU, he does his secret. He says, call all the top people in Singapore, and that they're going to do some seminar on control behavior and so on and so forth, and they're going to sell those things to all the world and so on. Control crowds and so on, predict crowds and so on and so forth. I think it's the wrong kind of social science. We can have your social science section here, and I'm a social scientist, anthropologist, psychologist, psychiatrist, and so on. You can outdo them. Show to the world that they got pretty rotten social science. And that's why it's so bad. You know our friend Maslamat? He was at the ISD was advised by a lot of psychologists. Be nice to him, be good to him, be good to him. And you know what happened? The smart guy, he jumped off. Without a social scientist, he would still be inside the place. He would have gone in Malaysia. So as I say that with good social science, number one, number two, some more here, count me in.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, anywhere.
I think that is a fantastic question. I don't know, other than, for example, the government trying to invest in this solar system project recently that went belly up. what was the name of that again? I forget. But I think even if the U.S. government wanted to do it, you're talking about hugely contentious. And you understand it. U.S. conflict is yes. Bicameral instead of a Senate, and then you've got your House of Representatives and so on. And there's so much check and balance that I don't think any government would get away with having a number one, a company, and then how they begin to run it in the interest of the country.
So, from my understanding, it is illegal for the government to own and or operate a business, especially the US. Then why is our government doing that? As far as I understand,
sure.
The public transport, MRT, it is a private company. The SMRT, SBS bus, when they need money, the taxpayer pumping billions of dollars into it. But when they are making profits, it is private. There is a conflict of interest between business, big business in Singapore, and government.
I think a gray area would be in sovereign wealth funds. Right? Sovereign wealth funds still continue to manage public savings and reserves and so on. That's where I think perhaps maybe we started getting off on the right track, wrong track with Temasek Holdings. And then of course there are Singapore Power, which I don't think we should privatize for security reasons. Right, and if your PSA, SIA, as I said earlier, if they're working well, these, in my, there is an argument to be made for it to continue being run by the state. But I think we've gone on to the deep end when we talk about governments getting in on amusement arcades. Really, that's why if you look up subsidiaries, you trace it back, but it belongs to Temasek Holdings. Then I think we should begin to look at and divest.
I think your question has to do primarily with the conflict of interest, and I think this is something our government not only takes lightly, I don't think so, but they actually take advantage of it and use it. Notice why we put up points like people who are in the government, like ministers and MPs and their relative, taking position in the like GRC, the GRC, or rather the GIC, not the GRC. But in the States, you are correct. The government cannot have private companies, with one exception. Is the U.S. Post. They still run the U.S. Post, and the reason is because this is historical. It is considered national security. I mean, if somebody were to hijack the U.S. Post, then they're in trouble. But of course, you can say in the age of internet, U.S. Post is just another courier company. But they haven't changed that law. But otherwise, this matter of conflict of interest is taken very seriously in democracy, and I'm quite sure not just the U.S., elsewhere as well. In Norway, for example, they have the sovereign fund, right, where they have this kind of like our GIC, but it is totally transparent and totally accountable, and some of these ideas are borrowed from the Norwegian model.
Anyone?
Sorry, can I address this question? Just now we're talking about US come to other country to do investment. Is it legal or illegal, right? Even within US. Within US, okay. Because the US, what I know is what they come to the country, they do investment in it. It can be said legal. You see? they con you by the way of using the, if I'm not wrong, it's using the TPP, right?
Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Something like this. So they bring in the big corporate company to your country so they can do whatever you like. You cannot sue them.
No, I'm talking about the investment bedroom.
Yeah, they are doing all this all part of the world. But you don't know provision inside there. Even our Prime Minister want to sign that. Even China and Russia, they don't want to sign it. Even the last APEC meeting, China asked them to show them the provision. The US just keep quiet. You see?
Corina?
Just like you mentioned about the retrenchment insurance, does it only for retrenchment people, I mean the workers, or as well as those people who are laid off, like reconstruction, people who are asked to resign by themselves? You know, there are a lot of companies now who are practicing this kind of situation where they give you the reason that, okay, we are not doing well, you resign by yourself.
Right. Well, in the paper, what we did suggest that there are loopholes where workers want to game the system. There needs to be certain what you call safeguards, right? People who are fired for misconduct, folks who resign. You cannot then do that and then hope to claim for restart. Correct? I mean, you get people say, I find a job, right? Within a month, within 3 months, right? Then I resign and I get back on for another 6 months. And I find another job again, I just quit again and then continue to do it that way. Just to prevent that kind of an abuse of the system, we put in some safeguards, as I said. But people who legitimately, and that's why also that wage equity, well, you need to have bodies, authority bodies can actually adjudicate, hear some of these cases, whether they're genuine or not, and then there's disputes, resolve it. And people who genuinely are retrenched, and I say, people who actually abuse and questionable cases, they're few and far between. People straight up, many of them are laid off, immediately they can get on this restart program. Anyone else?
Regarding the retrenchment, you're talking about the workers. Are they only the Singaporeans or SPR, foreign workers?
We're talking really about, you see, the whole idea of foreign workers doesn't quite hold. That's why I say we look at it in its entirety. In our population budget, what we proposed was that foreign workers, all wishing to work in Singapore, need to apply through our talent track scheme. Right? You have to fill out forms and tell us your skills, your age, your competencies, and so on. Only when you meet up and then your points are awarded. It's very much like the Canadian, the Australian system, right? Only when you hit a cutoff, then you are you shortlisted to go into a pool. All Singaporean employers who cannot find a Singaporean, right, that they can employ, then can go into this pool and recruit foreign workers. Correct? Now, if that were to be, is that situation here? In a situation whereby you are retrenched, a foreign worker, they have no cause to continue on in Singapore because you don't have a job. So it doesn't make sense for them to get on restart. A case can be made for PR because they're residents here in Singapore. But then you pay into the system. It's insurance. It's not just you're sitting collecting benefits for nothing. We take, as I said, it works out to be about, on a sliding scale, about $10 per worker, and then your employer pays into it as well. But to answer to the long story short, your question, foreign workers are not don't qualify. The rationale is not there for them to start program.
Hi, Sun Juan. It's nice to see you again after the Sydney visit. Just a quick one. TPP is a very bad one, and if I were you, never get into TPP. You know that the case, the Australian, I come from Australia, the plain tobacco packaging, where Australia now has, and American British Tobacco is using some Hong Kong law to sue the government for destroying their private labor. Quick question about this foreign worker. It's interesting where the government has a complete say, so there's no research, so you bring in as many people as you like. If you follow the or Canadian example, you wouldn't have any maids at all. You wouldn't have any workers because our foreign workers are considered as local residents, and unless you are very specialized, you will never get in. The question about inequality, I'm sure many of you have read the famous Thomas Piketty's book, The Great Inequality of the World. So, and I think, what is it? Oxfam has recently said that 1% of the world's population own 50% of the world's wealth. So I would say to you that yes, you can tweak here and there, but it's a great inevitability of global capitalism that you find the exacerbation in growing poverty. You know, the other thing is that why take it at 28% of tax duty? Actually is considered very low. I think Australia has a higher one, and our income tax at the highest level will be something like 36%. And yet, if you do that, you can afford to give the old poor fellows a bit of a pension, and therefore not having to consider that poverty, having to sell their cheap labor for 10 hours, you know, washing bowls. One question I also want to put across is, you being a psychologist, I think as a Malaysian and Australia, I've noticed that Singapore also has a bit of a chip on the shoulder of kiasu attitude. That thinks that, you know, they are the best in the Asian region and looks a bit down on other people. That in a way put you at a different level as our colleagues or as cousins in the context, and perhaps some of this, I mean, I know it's very hard to do anything about it, and if, you know, it's corrected, then it gives us a much more level playing field. Thanks.
You know, as far as the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal is concerned, I just have one question. Does anybody know what's in the TPP? And then when you follow that up, okay, why are our parliamentarians not insisting that the document must come before Parliament, it must be scrutinized, it must be debated, and then it must be voted on before the government will then have the mandate to go and say whether they'll join it or not? I don't understand, okay? And apparently it's all been negotiated already. Obama is asking for the Congress for fast track. And the Congress is saying, well, we haven't seen the document yet. And say, well, it's all in the air, it's conducted in secret. This is where the problem comes in. But if you have any experience with free trade agreements as far as Singapore is concerned, okay, and I've seen the EU-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, which Lee Hsien Loong was just in Germany to urge them, European Parliament, to ratify. I've seen that document, and I think it's available online as well. There is a clause for everything, every kind of business, from printing. If a dispute becomes, then what do you do? And then you go inside, where are the workers? Where are workers' rights? Right? So when I was in Rotterdam not too long ago, we brought this issue up. We say free trade without freedom. Free trade is just another way of exploiting your workers. US-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, passed in 2004. There was a clause in there that said that it included what they call the Integrated Scheme something, ISI, I remember. That clause in there, right, included Batam. Okay? And what has Batam got to do with the US-Singapore Free Trade Agreement? Right? I was in the US and I brought up this point with the AFL-CIO. I said, that's a clause that so clearly shows that the Singapore government's intention of just getting cheap labor at the expense of our workers. So that when you get into the situation like that, all the benefits are the business elite. But then when I brought this up, I remember Lee Kuan Yew at that point accused me of undermining Singapore's interests. This is where I think it's made very clear. Okay, Singaporeans must not continue to be fooled by this government. What it's going to, all these free trade agreements, is going to benefit the business elite, and as we've showed up over and over again, our workers, productivity, our happiness, and so on, all being compromised for the ease of business elite to have better trade.
Singapore signed already? Singapore signed already, right?
I've not followed the news today, but I just saw Prime Minister actually urging the European Parliament to ratify. I don't think the European Parliament has voted on it yet. Yes, I saw a hand.
Yeah, Dr. Chee, I love your tax proposal. I think the productivity of our nation are also something to do with all this taxation. No? Okay, example, if we based on last time income tax, okay, there will be a lot of pressure on the government to increase a high value added job, because their fiscal spending is all based on the direct tax. Okay, if now every taxation move into indirect, so there are no incentive to create any high value income job. So now the whole system is based on number, create a bigger quantity. So now I think it's because of this, we have to fall into this population growth economy by creating that number and creating the consumption tax, indirect tax, to compensate the direct taxing. So in the long run, it will be the quality of life will be affected. And this is a very easy out of governing.
I think if you're talking about an increasing amount of data coming up and showing that inequality as it widens, one of the things you've got to do is to make sure that your taxation is not regressive. That's the very important issue. I did not put up the slide, but it's in our paper. If you look at just a sampling of some of the countries, you look at the countries with very low income tax rates for the rich, as in Hong Kong. Hong Kong's ours 20%. I think Hong Kong's is 15%. And then you compare as you go down the list to say Germany. All right, you find that as taxation rate goes up, your income inequality closes. Okay, there is something to be said in terms of having a more progressive taxation structure, and that's why I think we've got to. That there must be an optimal level. Too much, and you're going to be. It's not going to work at all. At least that's from our standpoint. But right now we're right at the other end. As I said, Singapore traditionally has no gains tax, right? Capital gains tax. We just abolished inheritance tax, and we've kept our top taxation rate down to the lowest, and then that's produced all sorts of problems for our economy right now. So we were saying, have some sense, have some balance and some reasonable balance to it, and I think we can achieve that with our proposal, with our program.
So, Dr. Chee, my name is Ricky. I would like to ask you one question, because with your economic proposal or your alternative economic proposal, I would like to ask this question for PAP and maybe from the press also on behalf of the press. Because PAP, every time when we ask a question about social welfare, where do you get they always say, where do we get the money? Right? PAP always say that. When we ask for subsidy on education, they ask you, where do I get the money? I think the press, I will speak for the press also, they will have to ask you this question. Because they dare not to ask you, but I'm going to ask you, and on behalf of PAP, they always say that. Every time we ask, hey, help the poor, they say, where do I get this money to help the poor? Education, where do I get this money to help the to subsidize education? Medical, where do I get this money? So I ask this on behalf of the press and PAP, Mr. Chee.
I can vouch for Ricky Liu is not from the PAP, so
yeah.
Now, you notice that as we've gone along through our years, we've also made sure that we we would make proposals on how we can pay for these programs. A restart is just one of them. Okay. Now, if we talk about health care, if you go in and look at our paper, Professor Tambaya and the advisory health care panel has worked out what we need to make sure that our program is universal and it is completely affordable, so that you don't get people ruined because, or you continue to put MediSave into the equation and deprive people of the retirement incomes. How do we pay for all this? Well, in our paper, what we can say is, look at the budget. Is there a need to be spending that amount for our defense budget? Look at it. One of your F-135, don't know what planes that they get out. It's a huge, and you've got to have this transparency, this accountability. Come to the people, the parliament, and justify all this expenditure. So that if you know how, if you begin to say prioritize your budget, you can begin to support all these programs, correct? Then you've got to get an idea on what. And you know, the PAP prides itself on this having this helicopter vision. But you know, it's something which continues to befuddle me. Right? Because if you sit and you look at the problems that we face today, look at the changed world, and look ahead, what is needed, right? What is the most important, right? Then you prioritize your budget in that manner, correct? And one of the most important is the education of our children. Gone are the days where people just memorize your facts and figures. Right? You have Google able to do this all for us. You come to a stage where Google, for example, has manufactured this contact lens, right? Which you put it on, it will measure the glucose levels of your body, and be able to tell you where the problem is. And then they're using the filament lenses, tinier than your hair filament, okay? Through your eye drops. That's the level of advancement. India, right, has sent a Mars mission, to Mars, correct? Based on a $100 million budget, they say lower than the Hollywood blockbuster budget. That's where innovation is today. And I've just listed out the kind of unproductive nature of economy, the uninnovative kind of, we are getting left behind. If this government knew how we're going to survive into the future, you would put a lot of priority into making sure that the system supports, develops, fosters innovation and productivity. I don't know, but you look at the budget right now, which Mr. Shanmugaratnam is going to present. It just doesn't make sense if you're looking at the complete picture and where we're headed. Anyone else? Any other questions?
Chee, will you comment about the NTUC, their trade union as well as big conglomerate now? They are also the employer, right? And then they go into symbiotic relationship, illegitimate relationship with the PAP. So what they produce is illegitimate products,
But on a very serious note, I think this is one big factor that's making why productivity is so low. I tried to explain a little while ago, but when you look at the psychology of this whole arrangement, and you look at psychological data that's come up, and you can talk about intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, how do you get people to be more productive? This way of controlling your workforce is not good. And it doesn't matter how much money you throw at the company. You tweak foreign workers levy and then think that somehow miraculously that's going to improve your productivity. You tried it, it's not shown to work. Now get down and seriously look at some of the data that's come out right now. Okay? That talks about productivity. That talks about workforce needing to be feeling secure, feeling a sense of that they belong to society, and that's when you can get the most out of them without having to, put their noses to the grinder and then make sure that they work how many hours. Randstad Group did that survey, showed that Singaporean workers in Asia are the least satisfied, and the moment's notice they will jump to another job. And ILO then tracked we work the most number of hours. All this data the government surely must have. And then when you look at it, how do you then begin to address this problem? And doing what they've been doing year in, year out, just tweaking the budget here and there just a little bit, that's not going to cut it. And I'm hoping at least we hear something different from the DPM and Finance Minister this budget. But, again, I'm not hoping.
Can I answer Ricky's question? To enlighten him, do we know how much reserve do we have? And every year on the returns of the dividends and the interest earned, is more than sufficient plus the surplus on every year's budget of 30 million. Why are they not properly equalize it instead of getting more and more surplus every year? And what did they do to the money? So if this can be fully utilized on the social problem, then I think there's no problem at all. So do you agree with this?
Yeah, I mean, you have this problem, and I think this is so unique to Singapore. When I mentioned to people when I meet outside, it just boggles the mind, right? You have your two sovereign wealth funds in Singapore. They control all our foreign reserves, correct? One is headed by Prime Minister, the other one by his wife. Neither of whom, we don't know, even for example, the amount that they manage. Okay, they wouldn't tell us. We don't even know, for example, Madam Ho Chee, right, what his salary is. I may be wrong on this. Has it been announced or stated? This is where the level, it just gets to a ridiculous level. Try that in any other democratic country. You wouldn't even get past the first gate. But here we are. The government will sit and say no, but we won't count all this information. But I tell you, this is the one thing. Okay, this is the one thing is SDP in Parliament. The next round, these are things that we will continue to ask, and we will not let go until a reasonable answer comes from them. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I only have one question. If the people willing, is the SDP ready to form the government?
I keep saying, I've mentioned this on several occasions. In government, you need a competent team. And this government, the PAP, has been building itself up, right, to be this competent, regime. Okay? But that's what they say. Now let's look at reality and look at the facts. Right? In 2010, you remember that this whole situation came up where they wanted to house foreign workers, put up the dormitories, correct? And they suggested in Serangoon Gardens. And when there was a huge outcry, Giorgio was the MP. Giorgio came up and said, yeah, we need a master plan. My jaw just dropped. Right? after almost 1 decade of allowing hundreds of thousands of foreign workers in, then you start telling us, you need a master plan, we need a master plan. Right? Now, because they didn't have this master plan, then you had all these foreign workers not knowing how, we didn't have the infrastructure to cope with this, correct? And then it resulted in the riot in Little India, right? And then when you have this little riot in Little India, then you have the Commission of Inquiry. And then they found that the police were woefully underprepared. Communication system was not working, personnel was not enough. The commander that went down didn't know where his forces were. No, I'm just talking about all these and just giving a few examples. Right. Then you want to dig up, you talk about Masalaman. And then your checkpoint repeatedly breached. There was this lady that came in, 3 days. She was driving around, they found her to be mentally unsound. And she was driving around, and she ended up in Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Right? And then you have this situation whereby your MRT depots getting repeatedly broken in. Just recently, another one. Right? Just imagine, that guy went in and just spray painted. But if he were a terrorist and he were to plant a bomb, my goodness, you know that kind of impact. So, you want to talk about competence? Talk about competence. We need to tell the people, this is the situation, okay, that you're dealing with. As far as the opposition is concerned, what we need to do is to continue to point these out, and not only point these out, these matters. We need then to propose alternative policies, like what we're doing, for the key areas, and then let the people see which political party has the wherewithal, the capability, the competence, right, to do what we set up to do. And that's got to be the benchmark. So it's not, I keep saying, let's not have the PAP saying, oh, we're so competent. And then the opposition say, oh, we're even more competent, or we're less competent. No. Show what the PAP has done and not done. And show what the opposition, the SDP, has done and not done. And then let the people decide. That's the best judge that we can.
Yes. I have a comment. Dr. Chee. Tan Chee says that the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund is at least $3.2 trillion. Do you think we have that sum?
I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows. I think Lee Kuan Yew, one of our, it's only one, and I asked him point blank. And he said, I'm not saying it. Others are saying, and he was GIC chairman. He said, I'm not saying, but others are saying that there is about $300 billion in. So he's kind of hinted, if I can make the conclusion, that that's the amount. Anything beyond that, I don't know, I've heard anything from 3 million to $1 trillion. This $3.2 trillion. That's not the one that I've heard first time. No one really knows. And that's the, I can tell that's the strange and uniqueness of this country. We have all our future savings in there. We don't know how much. That's crazy. Yes, ma'am. Perhaps maybe one last one, and then we can wrap things up.
I think this is something that so far nobody is quarreling on it. It's about income tax. The people are paying income tax. From what I see from a notice that brought up, why those MP or the Prime Minister, President, they are not paying tax, they are tax-free. So this is something, they are getting money also like us, they are like employees. So why they are tax-free and we have to pay tax? Can we bring this up to the Parliament?
I think for ministers, because it's a salary, they are paying tax on it. And I think the president too is paying taxes on his salary. That's a salary. when it comes to members of parliament, those are considered allowances, huge allowances, but nonetheless considered allowances because they are allowed to have employment outside of their MPship. An allowance, I don't know if they've changed or not, but the last time I checked, it's not taxed. It's not taxed. But they do have to pay cut off for CPF and Medisave. CPF, Medisave you cannot run away from. But taxes, I think it's tax free. I think the last count, what was the amount? $16,000. Right?
Yeah, something like that.
I still fail to understand why they can't do full-time work to represent people. I think that's, yeah. But then again, that's the quality is. I don't know. That's my own. It's very difficult. It is very difficult to have a full-time job and then concentrate and do political work at the same time. It really is requires all your energy and all your focus. That to me still very difficult to reconcile. But just to answer your question, MPship.
I want to add something to that. Now, your question is legitimate. So was his just now about how much we have in our reserve. But these are questions that we could have an answer quite easily, but yet nobody knows the answer.
Yeah, right.
They should just say, well, put us in parliament and we will be your voice. We will ask those questions for you. Because allowance or no, all of us have to pay income tax on our allowance too, even gifts. If you receive a gift in the course of your business, if you get a car, if you get a hamper, you're supposed by right to declare that. Whether you do or not is a different story, but you are supposed to declare that. And it will be taxed on those. So, they are not telling anything. So, whether they are paying tax themselves, we do not know. And these are questions as public servants, they should have answered. But today, they have not. And we're celebrating our 50 years. So it's time to
change the government.
Extract some
I'll very quickly repeat what I said at the launch of our GE campaign on the 10th of January. And the government for so many decades has gotten away easy because they've not been held to account, they've not been made to answer some of these questions, and they give us answers which frankly is just nonsensical, and nobody has followed up and pursued it to its logical end. Hopefully we will see the end of that kind of parliamentary situation at the next election.
Can I say something?
Yes, one last
I want SDP to be in Parliament to change how Parliament is running. Not Q&A session, but a debate session. Not Liang Sampo. We need to debate because now, for 50 years, Parliament has been question, answer, that's all. No debate, no follow-up. I want SDP to go inside and debate issues and help Singapore.
There's something called, I always liken what we are, the situation we're at now, to the McDonald's kind of accountability. Right? You go to McDonald's, there's a suggestion box in there. Right? You put in your suggestion, and then whether the management wants to take it up or not, or there's something they answer you for PR purposes. That's not what a parliament is. That's not what a parliament is. If we're in there, you can be sure that we will table motions. We can even do it, private members don't. Right? But these are the things that we can table. And then the government, the House leader will have to table it. Speaker will have to table it, and we will have a proper debate. Okay? And then when they come back to us about why they cannot do certain things, then let all the people hear the ridiculousness of their answer. But at the very least, you've got to be there to make sure you table all these proposals and ask them to consider it. And if they don't want to implement it, ask them why. And then you come up with our own arguments, supply them data, supply them information. We will then get into government parliamentary committees, the different areas, finance, health, education, and that's where we sit in. And we can then call members, your professionals to come and testify before GPC, hear from them what some of the data is and so on, and then formulate policy, help to formulate policy from there. Okay, this is something which one very good example will be the recent tabling of MediShield Life. All right, if you've read our paper, you've seen, and this one Professor Tambaya can better explain. You have all these big bills, okay, that people cannot pay, and we owe the Ministry of Health is owed, all these public hospitals are owed about $110 million in 2011 or so. What does the government do with it, right? It looks really bad if they continue to bankrupt people because of the health care. So what do? Introduce MediShield Life. The premiums, you take it, you pay for all these outstanding bills. But how does it solve the problem when people are saying, you know, MediSave, we cannot afford it, right? You're still making the people pay either through MediSave or out of pocket. Whichever it is, it's still our own money. These are the things we've got to bring up to the government. And then when you compare it to other countries, where the government's portion of health care expenditure is about 70%, the PAP is shirking its responsibility, spending only about 30 to 40%. I brought this up even at the first publication, Dare to Change. Not much has changed in 20 years. And this is where we need to continue to push, get data in, and continue to challenge their presumptions and their statements. Okay. If there are no other comments and questions on behalf of John and Wai Fong, we want to thank you very much and hand it back to.
Sorry, can I have the last question?
Very short comment. Yes, go ahead.
Since you have proposed so many policy, do we have any solution that can help to solve the to regroup the Singapore populations, where one of our populations have been murdered by the people in 1968. So because of this stop at 2 policy is the mother of all problems, what we are facing today, right? So the PAP today, they have no solution to solve this problem.
But
so they just keep on bringing foreigners to top up.
It is a very grave situation. I've met a few MNCs and their leaders, top management, and they were saying that this is a very serious problem because of the lack of manpower, human resources. And this is, I think, the government doesn't know what to do with it, but we've proposed that in our population. It's not just continuing to bring in foreigners. You've got lower cost of living, encourage our younger couples, give them proper housing and so that you can encourage them to reproduce. Don't make cost of living so high. Yes. David, I think we have to...
Okay, answer his question.
Yes. Very short one.
Answer his question. On top of those cost of living, all that, now you bring in a couple of Chinese or Indian, right? They are only producing 1, 2. And then they bring in their parents-in-law. So 20 years down the road is 6 against 2. So it doesn't solve the problem. Probably if we adopt children 3 years above from Asia, right? You bring them in. Those who can't give birth, go and adopt it. The rest, the government raise them. They will be the world champion if you want to. They can be table tennis champion because they are so thankful to you to bring them up. You know what I mean? Rather than to train those youngsters, when they grow up, become fat, they cannot be a champion. Right? So this is the solution, probably, if we can introduce it. Adoption of children. Do you agree?
Not sure.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you for this very exciting debate. Before I wrap up this today's session, I have a few announcements to make. The SDP is going to have our Chinese New Year walkabout on the 15th of February. The meeting place is 8 a.m. Bishan MRT. Please join us if you can. And also, if you like what you hear today, you like our policy, please come forward and join us as a volunteer. Ricky has already done that, so please join us for volunteer. And for those of you who are new with us today, you don't know who to approach, where to go to, our friendly reception is over there. they can assist you. You just have to put down your name and we will do the rest. Your name and contact number and email address. We will contact you, okay? And the last thing is, in order to help us defray some of our organization costs, I will be passing our donation box around. Please help us, not just for this organization cost, but help us be your voice in Parliament so that we will have the funds to run a good campaign for this upcoming general election. Thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Singapore Democratic Party, thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. There are coffee and tea, and so for those of you who have not enough of the discussion, we are still around to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very
And you're with your
Vietnam. Yes. I met some of them. Charlie is very motivated. What I think we can do is, rugby is very important. I mean, like, for this, the crowd. Let them saw and then do field work. I'm sure with field work, they come with some kind He's a smart guy, he's all good at everything.
Savings account, and that takes care of sufficiency. I think what we're saying is implement many savings, retirement savings program, right? Along the way, 3 years, there's a lot of money. Then they said, okay, then you can take it not just for money savings, then you can use it for then you can with their long take it up for your Singtel, shares A and B and so on and so forth. If you go to our data, take a look at the schedule, in there, all the different kinds of schemes, and then you'll be shocked to see a number of schemes that people can get to take their money out to use for purpose other than retirement. That's where I think reform am very encouraged. And let's say we will put up on our website what kind of response. We never had that feedback in terms of their volunteering and in terms of of course, in our situation, it's always important to continue to expand. No wonder he made a statement where we calculate in terms of the continue to push on these two fronts in terms of finances or fundraising. As well as but to answer your question, it's very important. The last walk of our question, we had record. In fact, usually we take about 1 bus of members and activities. This time around, we had to get 2 buses, and even that pushing at the same time. So we want to bring the see in India. And that is way below what the maximum which PAP spends. They spend about 60,000. The way you calculate it is number of voters. And under the Elections Act, you're allowed a maximum of $3 per voter. So in one single seat, you roughly have about 20,000, some of it, some less. But if you multiply that, you're talking $60,000, $70,000 in terms of the maximum you can spend. For us, you know, it's not so much that you need to spend before you're effective. It really is running a smart campaign. A smart campaign, you don't need to match the PAP dollar for dollar. But there is a minimum threshold below which it becomes problematic. I mean, things like, for example, posters, the plywood backing, all these are fixed costs already that you just can't run away from. And then when you try to scrimp on them, you just don't have enough posters to put up. So these are the things, but looking, as I said, we don't, the amount would really depend on the number of candidates. So you do 20,000 per candidate. Right? And this is actually based on 2011 prices. Right now, I think it's gone up already. But if you talk about, say, roughly about $20,000, you feel 10 candidates is $200,000. We're definitely fielding more than that because last elections we already fielded 11. So you're really talking about an amount that is like hundreds of thousands. We're obviously nowhere close to that yet. But this being the early part of the election cycle, we're going to continue to make it.
So it's still in the stages also working towards this.
Yes, I think that's. But we don't want to wait until the last minute. I explained last time. Printers, you need to actually get in. You cannot tell them, "Oh, we'll pay you after." They're not going to use cash on delivery. Oh, that's the more the merrier. The more the merrier, right? And Singaporeans, after the last election, there seem to be changing. So I hesitate to give you a number. Why? Because last time we completely underestimated. We expected 30 to 40 people to show up. But actually 600-700 people, in fact I think it was more than that because some of them could not. But there was a huge number. I expect this election to be more. So if you're talking about that benchmark, it's upwards of that. Okay. Thank you.
Chee, can I just confirm your age? Just an update on
50,
50, right?
50, hold on, 52.
52. Okay. What exactly is your birthday?
July.
July, okay, so not yet. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nothing at all. And then was even for this paper, and then then kick off, then they almost, you know,
So
gradually
we
ramp.
understanding that you're standing.
T-shirt for you.
So that, but I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious. What do you think?
Not really cow sharing. It's more like every client and their own holder, that's all.
Because when you go in and say, oh, we're going to reach
Uncle, auntie. So everybody, uncle, auntie.